how's my hair?
Same color as mine. French.
So we got Kenny Lee Lewis here, guitar player extraordinaire, of course, because I wouldn't be here.
Nice to meet you.
From Steve Miller Band.
Right, Steve Miller Band.
Steve Miller Band.
Right.
And you've been with the group for a little while now.
I've been with the group for 28 years now.
How you like that? 28 years, you
I don't know.
You must like it.
Well, I took a break in 87. I had my first child, and she's now 23. And I just didn't want to be on the road raising my first kid, so I took a little break and decided not to tour for a while. And he was doing a jazz album at the time, and he was using some cats from Minneapolis anyway. And they were all with the, Ben Sidran's band. Ben Sidran's had a couple of television shows in the States over the years and co-wrote the song Space Cowboy with Steve. So he's kind of a jazz bow guy. So he had a band already. So we decided, when Steve did his last album for Capitol, which was an album called Born to Be Blue, he decided to use the rhythm section that Ben had and do this record. And he basically, he sent me the record, and I think he probably would have had me toured with him, but I just thought the record was weird. Because it was all, like jazz standards and stuff, so I just said, I don't think Apple's going to let you release it. I think it's too bizarre, and sure enough, they didn't, and he had to forcefully make them release it contractually.
So it got released eventually?
Got released, and they went out and toured, and of course, nobody cared about the jazz tunes. Also, Steve had fun with them, of course, and the band was really great. But they weren't doing the hits. They were doing a lot of these songs off the album. And so what happened was, this is Steve Miller's Greatest Hits CD, the one that you were telling me about today. You asked me how many it sold.
Yeah.
That one. That just came out on CD when they were touring, supporting that other album called Born to Be Blue. So then all of a sudden, all these kids started buying the CD, and they started digging it. They started showing up to gigs. They wanted Jungle Love. They wanted Rock and Roll. The Joker. Right, he didn't have the songs there. So they basically had to teach all those songs to a jazz band to play these pop hits to go out, and all of a sudden this business just started exploding. Classic rock radio format was huge all over the nation, and he was just getting tons of action. So basically, he had to teach a jazz rhythm section how to play eighth notes and shuffles, and they adapted very well. What I mean? We had a saxophone player at the time, and there was some other cats, and Billy, the bass player, who just recently left, is an upright player. He owns a jazz club in St. Paul. He plays primarily upright bass when he's not doing Steve's gig. So he was a bebop guy. So it was pretty interesting band, to say the least. But Steve probably would have had me tour with him, but I just was, I didn't really feel like touring, and plus I didn't think the album was anything. I didn't plan it, so I didn't have anything to do with it, so I just kind of sounds weird to me. I don't get it.
But eventually come back into the scene.
Yeah, that's another story. But that just finishes up what we were talking about as far as how far back I went with him. Because I was with him on the Abracadabra album, in '81, the winter of '81, and we worked on the Abracadabra album together at Capitol, and then toured with him in '82.
Where did Steve find you?
The drummer that played on all of Steve's hits was a guy named Gary Malaber. He actually played on Moondance for Van Morrison. That's how far back he goes. He was from Buffalo, New York, and he played on a lot of the Eddie Money hits and Peter Frampton and Jackson Browne and Bobby Ray records. He was a studio guy, but he played on all Steve's hits. And Steve was kind of in a dry spell, and Gary and I had a band, and we had a band called Kid Lightning, and we were making records. We made 2 records with that band, and neither one did anything. And then we were working on our own record deal at the time. It was a band called Robbie U-Bop that never did anything. But we had, a lot of big labels interested. We had a lot of songs we'd written, and so we had 8 masters at the time that were all finished that we'd done in our garage. And Steve just called Gary one day and said, Gary, I know you're right. He goes, I'm dry. I need some material. And so Gary came into the garage and he asked me and our co-writer John if we should give our demo songs to Steve, see if he wanted to do one of our songs. So he said, sure. Send him over the master. It'd be fun to have Miller cover one of our songs.
Right.
Well, he took all 8 of them.
Yeah.
And he also transferred our masters over to 24 track, because we just had a late track half-inch, He transferred the masters over, put vocals and guitars on them, added 2 more songs, one of which was Abracadabra. And we helped him produce that record. And that was in, like I said, the winter of '81. And so I was a producer and writer on the record before I was in the band.
Okay.
And then the next thing I know, he just called me one day and he said, hey, you're all over this record, because he transferred the tapes. I mean, I'm already playing on the record, you know what I mean? This is by way of transfer. So he just said, you're already on the record, you wrote half these songs, why don't you just come out and tour with me? So I didn't have to audition or anything. He just asked me. And at the time, I was a very successful studio bass player. It was like a double scale guy. I played with all the guys in Toto, Carls, and all that stuff. And it was kind of a hard decision to leave town because I was doing very well in town as a studio cat. And then my fiance at the time was then my wife. We talked about it a little bit. She says, well, it's not like you're just like a sideman. It's like you're promoting your own material. So it's almost like you've got a band now. It's just Steve Miller's the lead singer. It's pretty interesting. And so I decided to go out.
With Steve Miller, do you have a collaboration also? Like when it comes time to recording albums?
Not this one that we just did, because he already had the songs figured out that he wanted to do. And none of them were anything original other than 2 songs that he had from Jimmy Vaughn. Stevie Ray Vaughan's brother wrote 2 songs, one of which you heard today, which was, actually you heard both. It was Hey Yeah, and that song Sweet Soul Vibe, which we haven't got on the set, but it's the song that we'll be pushing.
And Hey Yeah is on the official
Hey
website.
Hey Yeah's on Bingo, Sweet Soul Vibe's on Bingo. Those are the 2 Jimmy Vaughn tunes. Those are the only 2 newer songs we're doing, and those have already been recorded and released by him. It's just that, nobody, they weren't hits. So Steve just snatched them up, decided to put a stamp on them, see if he could make it hits. And then all the rest of the songs are just old blues and R&B tunes. So I've got 7 or 8 pieces with Steve right now in the can that we've been working on over the years, but we've never finished them. And we haven't done a pop record since '93.
Wow.
So.
The process of going into the studio, and that, is it long?
We did these pretty quick. We did these up at Skywalker Ranch up in the Marine County, north of San Francisco. This is where the Lucasfilm does all their sound, tracks
so you're
for
working
the
there.
Star Wars movie. Yeah, that's where we're working
Wow.
at Lucas Studios. It was really wild. Yeah, the room was huge. It was like you could put a dirigible in there.
George Lucas walking down?
No, he just owns the place.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful place. It's like a French, chateau thingy with it's like a big country estate. It just goes for miles. It's crazy. But we were in and out of there, I'd say, I don't think we took but 2 weeks to do most of those tracks.
Record on 24 track, digital,
Both Pro
and
Tools.
analog?
Both. We did Pro Tools and 24 track 2 inch at the same time.
Really?
But I think that I don't even know if we used the 20. He might use the 24 when he mixed. I can't remember exactly what he did, but Steve just sticks it into Pro Tools, and it's like that he manipulates it from there, and it's so good now. I mean, 96 resolution on 196. Geez, you can't really tell much difference now between tape. It is nice to go to tape and then transfer it over if you want that sound, but then once it's in the domain of digital and you've already got the 2 tape sounds and whatever on there, then it stays pretty much the same.
Another thing too, you do your own solo projects, like with music,
Mm-hmm.
like jazz improvisations
Mhm.
and stuff. Is that your main love of guitar playing?
Well, it's my main challenge on guitar
Okay.
because I've been playing rock and roll and blues and pop rock for so many years that that's like falling off the log for me. To do the Wes Montgomery techniques with thumb and then really get in all the substituted changes and all those altered scales and stuff, that's the thing that gives me a challenge, and it's like I did that in college and I got sidetracked with this rock and roll career.
Right.
And then now at 56 years old this year, basically I'm getting back into trying to woodshed those heads and memorize all those standards and bebop tunes so I can go sit in with the old guys when I go to New York and stuff. You get up on stage and blow, and know exactly where they're going, at any tempo, any key.
When you were a young guy, how many hours a day did you practice,
When I was a young guy, when I was a really young guy, like 13, 14, 15, I was practicing a lot. I was practicing at least two to 3 hours a day, and then even put the guitar into the sheets at night,
Yeah.
When I was supposed to be in bed, my mom would come back, get that guitar out from under the sheets,
Yeah.
I had my headphones on,
Always listening to music.
Yeah.
Who's some of your great guitar players that you admire?
Well, let's see. I mean, obviously, Clapton and Hendrix were the first two that really got me excited. And then, but then there were others. I mean, I really got into Terry Kath from Chicago. I thought he was really good.
There's some interesting stuff in Chicago in the
Yeah,
70s.
yeah. Before he died, I mean, he was a really interesting. It was different because he had a little jazz flavor in there. Also, great guitar player Terry Haggerty was in the Sons of Chaplin with Bill Chaplin, the guy that eventually was in Chicago. He was a really good guitar player, and he played a big fat jazz 175 guitar.
Right.
And that was in the old days. That was way back. And then I got into Carlos, but then I got into like Bruce Conti, with Tower of Power because he was kind of jazzy. And but a lot of the English guys I liked, were Beck and Page, Mick Taylor.
Mick Taylor, Rolling Stones, yeah.
I'm trying to think of some of the others, there was some American, and a couple other American. Well, I mean, I like Bloomfield a little bit. I like Alvin Bishop a little bit. They all were out of the Chicago school. And then Miller, of course, was on my list. And then the jazz cats were, of course, Wes Montgomery and Tal Farlow, Herb Ellis, people like that. I'm leaving one out. Damn it. God, too, he was great too. Howard Roberts.
Okay.
Howard Roberts, yeah. So all those guys, And, George Benson was in there too, but he was more, I got to name later,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say, my favorite electric player with a non-wound G string, and that's important, is probably Jeff Beck.
Jeff Beck.
Yeah. But obviously the wound G string guy is Wes Montgomery. So those would be right up there. And Hendrix we talked about this earlier, Hendrix was more like an artist. He was more like an Andy Warhol or a Pablo Picasso on guitar. He was like really different. He did these really weird soundscapes and textures, and he was like an artist. He was more like a painter, Because, there were some things on guitar that he didn't do very well, but other things he was a total pioneer in, and that's what opened a whole other door for guitar players. So he was like he ushered in a whole new way of looking at guitar.
For sure. And also Jimi Hendrix, would he be hearing today with the loud martial
Would have been
sound?
interesting to see where he would have gone had he lived. I'm sure he probably would have done very well. But I'm sure that eventually his music would have become passé too. People go, wow, that's just all that old Jimi Hendrix stuff. Somebody would have said that. They would have said, he always does the same thing. Yeah, he played this deep. You know what I mean? They would have just taken it for granted after a while. But because his life was so short, and he did so much in that little time, that it's a lot of art in a small packet of time. So therefore, he's an icon because I think of that. Had he spread that out over a career, he'd probably be like Carlos playing a joint in Vegas, just trying to make sure everybody's buying tickets, and buying his purses and his bags, It's weird.
Incredible. Your guitar collection. Now you have some shiny guitars.
Shiny.
Some of them.
How do you say shiny in French? In français.
C'est brillant.
C'est brillant.
C'est brillant.
C'est brillant.
Oui.
Guitarro. C'est brillant.
Brillant.
Ah, interesting. Some of them are Steve's. Some of them I would have not bought, but they're kind of cool. Like I have a red one. I would have never bought a red guitar. I don't know why. I always liked yellow, but I never had one. I don't know why.
Not yet?
No. Then I had that gold sparkle one, which was just laying around when he just plugged in and went, that sounds good. Because he's got so many guitars at his house, you just look and there's one sitting there. He's picking it up and going, okay, let's try this one. So that's how those kind of got into the guitar case. But mine are usually pretty traditional, sunbursts and maple tops and, kind of earthy colors.
After a while, do you retire guitars? Like after, let's say, you played them for so long?
Yeah, I guess maybe. I mean, I don't have any there. See, I got rid of all my vintage stuff years ago.
Why?
I needed the money.
Okay.
And I figured, well, what the hell? I can always buy a vintage, reissue. It'll probably play better than the one I had,
Okay.
It's just
so
not really worth as
the
much.
worn out feel to you is not something that you find comfortable?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because the Don Grosh guitars that I play that are new have the worn out feel, brand new out of the box. He put so much time into steel wooling those necks and getting those edges just all real smoothed out The way he does the edges, the frets and everything, they feel like they're 20 years old, brand new.
Huh.
That's why I like it.
Because I mean, the vintage market is ridiculous today.
Oh, I know.
You know, when did that start? Like late 1989 or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the last guitar I sold where I made even a little bit of money was probably about late 80s. I think I sold a 60 or 59 345 for about $1,200. I thought I made a lot of money.
Wow.
You know, because it's probably worth like $40,000 now. You know, and I sold a P bass that I bought for $150 when I was a kid. I sold it for $600. I thought, wow, I really made a lot.
For
of money.
how old was
It's
that?
probably worth about $20,000. You know, now. But
You never owned like 1957 Fender Strat or nothing.
I never had anything that old. I had a '63.
Okay.
I had a
That's still
'63,
old.
and they got stolen. You know,
Of
so
course.
I never kept that. You know, so I never retired a guitar because all the guitars I have are fairly new.
Okay.
You know, the oldest guitar I have that I play is that Rebel system. I bought that about '95, something like that.
Kenny's record collections.
Yes.
Now, you've got a big variety of musicians you like. Is there stuff you collect on vinyl, CDs?
Used to,
Okay.
and then I stopped buying records, of course, when they stopped making them. But I stopped buying CDs probably 10 years ago.
Okay.
You know, I get a couple free ones here and there, but I just don't go to the record store and buy CDs much anymore. I bought some bebop, I think a few years ago at a Virgin that was gone out of business or something. But you know, I basically just, you know, I have some favorite things that are in my laptop
Yeah.
that I just downloaded and got MP3s on or something. You know, just kind of acquired.
So you find that the iTunes and all that's going to take over for.
I think just the storage medium of any kind of a chip or a hard drive where you have like a list and a folder
Yeah.
is far superior than having to have physical stuff laying around.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like paper. You know, we try to go paperless. Well, let's go plasticless. You know, with music, I don't think you need it anymore. It's fun. I happen to have a warehouse full of about 10 to 15,000 LPs
Oh.
because my mother-in-law was a famous DJ in the United States, and when she passed away about 10 years ago, we inherited all of her records.
Wow.
You know, so and she's got stuff that nobody's got. You know, she's got like demos or weird things and interviews and things like that, or that are on disc with like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, stuff like that nobody even has. You know, so I've got to transfer all that to hard disk someday. I'm probably gonna have to hire some students from the college because I've got about 3 or 4 turntables at the house. And I'll just have them all sit down and just transfer everything eventually. But it would take a career almost to just get all this stuff because I got real tapes, I've got cassettes.
So you're
I've got 8-track cartridges. I've got the radio carts, which look like 8-track cartridges that go into these machines that nobody even owns. That all the radio stations use. I have all those. You know, I have so much media that I have to transfer. ADAT, mini disc. You know, it's all got to go into a hard drive.
A big warehouse full of this stuff.
Yeah. I got so much vinyl. It's ridiculous.
Who's your mother-in-law?
Her name was Martha Jean McQueen Steinberg, and she was the first black female DJ on the radio down in Memphis during the 50s, or one of the first. I think Willa was before her, but she was about the second one on radio, and she broke all the race acts, B.B. King and Bobby Blue Bland, all those guys down in Memphis in the old days. Grew up with Elvis, knew all those people and stuff. Then moved up to Detroit in the early 60s, and then broke all the Motown acts and was friends with all the Motown people, and then eventually bought her own station and had her own station until the time she passed. But she's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She's in the Smithsonian Institute. She's in the Radio Broadcasters Museum, RIA Museum, all that stuff. So she was pretty cool. We're actually going to be doing a life story on her, my wife and I. We're working on the basis of
A book?
Yeah, we're working on just trying to get the family tree together first, just so we can be loyal to that, because they're all from Memphis, and if you've ever heard of this, I don't know if you've ever heard of this terminology in Canada, but they have this thing down south called the woodpile. The woodpile is where the master used to take the slaves out in the back and impregnate the female slaves, so you could have more slaves. They were light skinned, and they also get all kinds of different names. That's how you ended up with all these people from Africa with last names like Mackenzie and things like that. It's just they called it the woodpile. And so Memphis is one of the areas where there was a lot of woodpile action going on. So there's people there that got a lot. Like my wife's got like Jewish in her. She's got a Jewish name, Steinberg, but she was raised a Catholic. and then her dad, who was the Steinberg, was a Baptist, you know, and they were like real light-skinned black people, and they looked like Samoans or something, you know, and it was like nobody could figure out what they were, you know, so it was very, very interesting part of the country where you get a lot of cross, you know, cultural, you know, going on, you know, in society and stuff like that. This is before the love-in days with the hippies. This is like, you know, before the turn of the century, you know. So it was pretty confusing. So their history stopped like a couple generations back, and they don't know anybody beyond that. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to clear some of that up right now, just for the sake of honoring the family. If we're going to do their life story, we ought to know who the hell they are and where they came from. You know.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of American Indian in them. You know, a lot of black. You know, it's just everything. It's crazy. And my kids are that way too. They don't know either. So we're just trying to figure it out for everybody. You know.
What do you think of the oil spill?
The oil spill. Wow, that's a career. Jimi Hendrix, the oil spill. Okay. I think it's disgusting. I think it's just a typical. You know, it just shows, you know, industry and where the buck stops is really where we're headed, and it's pretty sad because, you know, it's just a reflection on who we are as human beings and the dilemma of you know, the damaged goods that we are, you know, in the biological, you know, pantheon of, you know, whatever this world is all about, the third stove in the sun. We're a pretty sad bunch, you know. It's like, you know, and these are the messages that we were trying to send when we were hippies in the 60s, and then it kind of got lost, even though still the Woodstock state of mind kind of permeates a little bit in the youth. There's still the conservatism, I got mine, you go get yours kind of attitude. It's kind of like, you know, and don't cross my border, you know. It's all, you know, still going on, you know, and it's like it hasn't really changed much. In fact, Steve mentioned it tonight, you know, before he does Live in the USA, which is a song he wrote in '68. It's pretty prevalent today. It hasn't really changed much, you know. There's still starving kids in Appalachia.
Yeah.
You know, there's still abused children in our own neighborhoods. There's still, you know, obesity and lousy food and tainted water, and, you know, global warming just goes on and on. You know, but just having an oil derrick freak out, you know, is just typical. You know, it's just, you know, it's like it wouldn't be any different than somebody having a busted artery and having to have a triple bypass and then still go out and eat prime rib and smoke cigarettes all day long. You know, it's like, we just keep doing it over and over and over, and we never change, we never fix it, you know. So hopefully Obama, with all the pressure and all the microscopes that are on him right now, will put some legislation in before he leaves office to put some more, you know, regulations on these companies so they're just not so damn sloppy.
Compared to the 1980s.
Touring today compared to the 1980s. Well, we've streamlined it a little bit. We were a little extravagant back then. We used to carry really, you know, expensive, weird sets with big risers and everything. We had inner ear monitors on everybody, and we didn't have digital mixers, you know. So basically what happened is we shoot that guy.
He's too quick.
He's too quick.
We carried too much stuff. Plus we had opening acts we carried with us. You know, we carried our own lights, carried our own sound, you know, all that stuff. So and then also we flew everywhere. We flew just about everywhere, and the coaches were there just to be pretty much our dressing rooms. Now we're using the coaches more because actually, like you were talking about, what is a runner today? We get done with the show, we have to go to the next town to play the next day. It's much easier to get into a coach at 11 o'clock at night, turn on the TV, have a cocktail, you know, a couple shrimpies or something, you know, just wind down after the evening, and then eventually go get your bunk, go to sleep. And when you arrive at sunrise in the next city, you go to the hotel, you transfer the hotel, you sleep a little more, work out, take a shower, whatever you need to do, check out, and then you move on. You know, but what it is if you try to go to an airport, you do commercial airlines and fly to the next town, all that stuff, it's just crazy. I mean, you have to decompress, you have all that travel time, security and everything, it's just crazy. Now Steve has a private jet, so he's got it pretty cushy. He just goes to a little metro airport, has a citation for 500 or something, and it just takes him immediately where he wants to go, and it just lands at another metro airport. He gets out of the plane, he gets right on in a van or a limo, he just goes right to his room. He doesn't go through security. He doesn't do anything. You know, it's just like a van or a limo with wings. You know,
Wow.
and it makes life a lot easier for him. So at least he's able to be comfortable while he's touring, which is good. But we like the coaches better, and so we've condensed it down. We made the stages, the materials we use for the backdrops and for the everything in the staging hour is a lot more practical. It'll all compress into little stuff. It won't
Everything
break.
in a little box.
Yeah, it won't break, you know, and it looks good, you know, and it's like smoke and mirrors kind of a thing, you know. And you know, now that we have digital mixers, you know, we've cut down the size of all that stuff, and we're using smaller amps, you know. Got rid of the monitors on the floor, we're back to inner ears again. So it's a little more streamlined, it's a little more efficient financially, but still the impact is good in the show still good, and that's what we've done. And then we've lost a couple band members. You know, we lost Norton Buffalo, and then our bass player recently was went another direction, and we've even gotten smaller. And Steve hasn't bothered to try to replace either one of them. So we're doing everything now with just the four of us. You know,
That means the keyboard player has to do a lot more
he's
work.
doing a lot more stuff. He's the octopus. Yeah, I call him Joseph the octopus.
He's gonna grow another arm soon.
Yeah.
Kenny Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
What's your guitar rig?
My guitar rig for the Steve Miller Band consists of a Don Grosh retro classic single cutaway guitar that also has an AE system in it. It has a true rosewood and bone bridge in it, just like a Martin or something, with its own set of electronics and a separate output. What this enables me to do is have basically a Strat that has a splittable humbucking in the rear position, so I can
Okay.
still have that rear humbucking too. And then also a perpetual acoustic guitar that's going the whole night. And so the sound guy can just put that through a harmonizer and he can split it however he wants and use it whenever he wants. Obviously when I'm doing a solo.
It makes the thickness too rise.
Yes.
The sample.
It sounds like quad. He puts my guitar and he puts my regular guitar in stereo and he puts my acoustic in stereo. And then he soft pans the electric and he hard pans the acoustic and gets like this really cool sound. So I've got that going. And then my amp is a Rivera Fandango, which is a kind of like it's come from a bloodline from the Knucklehead, which is when I used to work for Rivera when it was owned by JBL Harmon. We came up with an amp called the Knucklehead, which was a real simple version of most of Paul's designs, and it concentrated a little more on just simplicity and kind of fixing the preamps. It has two preamps, to where one of them, when you set it up right, it has a lot of push-pull pots and a lot of little notches and little boosts and things in it. Once you set it up right, it sounds like a deluxe or something, like a blackface deluxe. And that clean sound is very much Princeton-y. Deluxe is kind of the sound that Steve used on all of his records. You know, when you listen to Rock and Me, and you listen to Jerry Liner.
So you're saying Steve Miller used the same type of amplification?
He used little champ amps. He used like little champ amps that were like face down on the floor, and he'd mic it from the back. And he did all kinds of weird things with Jim Gaines to get those sounds on those hit records. But most of it was a very, very tick-ticky single coil Strat through a clean Fender amp kind of a sound, and then he would just double them and kind of turn them up. And then if he needed a shingling, he'd just turn them up to 10 and use the natural distortion in the amp. So it was basically clean sound. So I used the Riveras for that clean channel. And then the distorted side on the Fandango has been improved even since the Knucklehead, because we've been improving Paul's lead sound for quite a while now, and get the transformers just right, you know, and the speakers combination just right, using the EL34s for the output tubes to get that more buttery British sound, you know.
A lot of modifications, like
some of them, but you know, but now this Fandango is all pretty much there. So now I'm notching it at 800 cycles now rather than 500, so I'm even letting the more low end go through on my lead sound, so I get a fatter lead sound. Plus he has a focus control, which is a dampening thing, which allows further excursion of the speaker, which gives you more low end because it's moving more air. So little tricks like that on the Rivera are kind of cool. So I like the Fandango because I think it gives me the best of both worlds. Great clean black face Fender sound with a really great British lead overdrive.
any relation to ZZ Top?
Any relation to them?
Fandango?
I know Billy. I had lunch with him several times when I was working at the Hollywood Guitar Center. But you know, we never really talked gear much. You know, we just talked other stuff, fishing and goofing around. And you know, he always has really cool shirts. And I was like, "Where'd you get your shirt? It's really cool." You get like people like Nudie to make his shirts, like in Nashville and stuff. But he's a cool guy, great tone. Steve's probably talked to him more than I have.
Yeah.
But like I said, Steve's kind of like a Les Paul kick right now. So he's got a couple pearly gates that he bought, and
Now
they do.
pearly gates like run over $16,000 probably.
Yeah,
now.
yeah. He's got several of them, and he really likes them. They do sound good. They really do clone
Yeah.
nicely. The custom shop at Gibson right now is doing a really good job. They're doing a really good job of, and thank God the flood didn't completely destroy that particular.
In Nashville,
Yeah, because I think the regular factory got pretty wiped out,
Yeah.
so they're having to retool and remove some of that stuff. But thank God the custom shop didn't get too damaged, and they've done a really good job.
Guitar Player magazine. There's going to be an article, or already has been an article.
There's an article being written right now by Matt. Can't remember his last name, but Matt got in touch with me recently, and he's doing the big article on the Bingo album, and he called me for some questions for a sidebar thing from
Okay.
Steve Miller's secondhand, second gun, and so I just got some things in there, so I'll have a little sidebar in that article.
So like that, it allows the young readers, because all the kids buy magazines to read, to discover the classics.
Yeah.
Steve Miller.
Well, Steve plays a lot of guitar on this album, and because Andy Johns helped him with the guitar tones, who was Glenn Johns' brother, who did all the Hendrix, Stones, Led Zeppelin records, all those things. Glenn was Steve's first engineer on his Sailor album. I think he did that in England. I think it was in England. Anyway, he was a great engineer, and so Andy learned all of Glenn's stuff, and he's great in his own right. He's done a lot of Stones and Zeppelin himself. And he got some great tones on Steve, and Steve plays a lot of guitar in this album, and I think a lot of young guitar players might get into Miller a little more, now that they don't see him so much as a pop icon, but more as a guitar player.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't see him as a guitar player, they see him as a pop icon.
Yeah, that's
Singing
true.
the Joker,
Yeah.
talking about Peaches and Midnight Joker, so instead of listening to his guitar playing,
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully, he'll get a little more attention for that.
Kenny Lee Lewis. Pleasure.
Pleasure to meet you, Jason.
Really good.